Thank you very much, and it is indeed a great pleasure and privilege to be here today and to talk to this audience about something which is, I think, a very important topic. And my perspective on this issue is, I think, to try and outline the motorist's perspective as road users. So, as was indicated in that introduction, the FIA is the global organisation, the peak body that represents motoring clubs, motoring organisations from around the world, and also a very key pillar which many people will also be familiar with the FIA in relation to is, of course, the organisation's role in the governance and oversight of motorsport around the world as well. So we bring together those two elements. I think sometimes there are challenges in reconciling the differing perspectives of our constituencies, but nonetheless I think it certainly makes for a very interesting and lively organisation. On the sports side, of course, the FIA seeks to ensure that there is fair and capably regulated events occurring around the world in a range of disciplines, and above all else, safety is a key goal. On the mobility side, which is my key area of responsibility, our mission is to ensure safe, affordable and clean systems of transport available to all. One of the things that the FIA does, and which its member organisations do around the world, is to play a role as a leading campaigner on a wide range of motoring-related issues. So road safety, environmental sustainability, increasingly issues of connectivity, the impact of technology, all of those things are very much front and centre for us, and you've already heard some of the figures in terms of the number of motoring organisations and the number of countries where we have a presence. One of the things I would say in terms of users' expectations is we would primarily emphasise two issues when we talk about what do motorists expect from the roads on which they get to drive on a daily basis. And I think the first thing that we must emphasise is safe roads. That's certainly a key priority, and we'll come to that. Of course, of an everyday concern is also reasonable journey speeds and expecting that you will get a reasonable standard and service from the infrastructure that you are utilising. And of course, I think when you contemplate behind the scenes how much motorists are paying or contributing to the upkeep of infrastructure as taxpayers, then you will understand why that is also a priority. So turning to the first of those issues, why is safety important? Why do we make this such a key emphasis in the points that we tend to focus on? And I think to understand that, we can talk about some of the things that have been achieved, not just through safer infrastructure, but let's also look at the contribution that safer vehicles have made in recent years. Earlier, or at a recent conference in Washington in early January, the US National Highway Traffic Safety Administration presented findings of a new report which showed that the basic vehicle technology, so just things like seat belts, airbags, child safety seats, electronic stability control, had saved more than 600,000 lives in the US between 1960 and 2012. So if you think about the numbers of people that are involved and the impact over time, I think it's a very tangible measure of what can be achieved just through one of the pillars of a safe systems approach when we're talking about road safety. So we emphasise a number of things. Many of you will be familiar with that safe systems approach. Safer vehicles, safer roads, safer people, and so on. There's a number of elements that we tend to emphasise. To pick up on the issue of improving vehicle safety, the role of Euro NCAP in the EU has been to emphasise the uptake, greater consumer awareness, and also putting a spotlight on industry to upgrade safety in vehicles. And certainly we've seen since the early 1990s a very significant impact that's had in this market. We're increasingly seeing that in other markets around the world. In Australia, in my former role, I was a board member of the Australian NCAP, and it performed very much the same function. The economic impact of safety can be huge. I think the estimates that we see are that if you put all of these factors together, safety, the impact of disruption as a result of traffic crashes and so on, it can be anywhere between 1% and 5% of GDP. On a global basis, the costs could be somewhere between $2 to $4 billion a day, which seems like an extraordinary figure. Nonetheless, there's a basis for that. It's not only users that suffer, but it has economic repercussions throughout the entire value chain. So it is a serious issue. As I mentioned before, if we take a safe systems approach, it's not just vehicles, it's not just the people driving the vehicles, but infrastructure, which is very much the focus here today, has a huge role to play. It cannot be underestimated. We have to look more at the role of that infrastructure plays in the safety equation. We have to consider, as we go forward, the interaction between vehicles and the infrastructure. With emerging technologies, that's going to become even more important as we go through. We must promote a systematic assessment of risk. As I mentioned before, motorists already pay significantly in a range of ways. They're often heavily taxed. In some cases, that tax revenue is going back into the infrastructure in many countries, and in many markets, though, what we see is that there's not a full return. Motorists are not getting the sort of return that they would expect from the contribution that they're making through a range of taxes, which should be ending up going back into infrastructure. The other thing, if we do promote a systematic assessment of risk, then I think it also assists us in identifying cost-effective treatments that will improve road safety. And one of the tools that the motoring clubs around the world have supported to achieve that outcome is the IRAP program, the International Road Assessment Program. I think this has made a tremendous contribution. We've seen some very good examples of what can be achieved through the application of the sort of methodology that the IRAP program uses. It has a simple philosophy. Road fatalities are largely avoidable. Road designs that help motorists understand the impact and which forgive driver errors. So improving road design is a key objective, and targeted interventions to improve existing roads have a very good economic payback. So in many cases, it's not about over-engineering solutions, it's about identifying quite simple, cost-effective treatments that will significantly upgrade the performance or the usability of the road from the motorist's perspective. Many of you may be familiar with the IRAP approach. Essentially, in very simple terms, what it boils down from a communications point of view is you have a system of star rating for roads. Of course, there's a lot more that lies behind the IRAP methodology. Eliminating high and medium risk road sections, creating awareness amongst all stakeholders, I think is important. If we look at some of the applications of this, recently we've had a case study in Mexico where 65,000 kilometres of highway were assessed in that country. There was a clear effort to identify and prioritise where high and medium risk road sections existed, how that can then be used, the cost at which one can apply treatments to eliminate those highest risk sections of road. The lowest ratings, the 1 and 2 star sections of road, and even at a cost of, say, 250 million, which is not a lot in the scheme of things, then you can substantially impact the proportion of roads in a country like Mexico that are 1 and 2 stars. Essentially, the rule of thumb, I think, is that the cost that applies from given crash circumstances roughly halves with each additional star that you give, or star rating that a road receives. So it's an exponential or growing impact as you move down that curve. But quite often, the costs are not so great. They're quite affordable. I think political will is a key, and I think what we're increasingly seeing in the leading markets where this sort of methodology has been applied is that governments do get it. And there are some clear examples where that is the case. I think everyone understands that Sweden has stood out in terms of its attention to road safety issues. It's still improving its road safety record, and certainly we have a commitment in that country to eliminate roads which have less than a 3-star road safety rating. The Dutch as well have also announced a goal to move to a minimum 3-star level for their secondary roads by 2020, and the Dutch Automobile Club, an FIA member, the ANWB, is strongly supporting and working with the government in that country to achieve that outcome. The UK, very active presence there. My cousins across the Tasman, the Kiwis, the New Zealanders, have also demonstrated a very effective ability to work between the user groups on the one hand and government to cooperatively get results through their Kiwi RAP program in that country, and we do see it as being used as a very effective tool there. So look, there's a few overview comments. If I can close perhaps by just emphasising a few key conclusions. One of the things I would say that from a user perspective we do want to emphasise is the need to set minimum safety levels, systematically assess risk and upgrade the quality of infrastructure. We see that as being fundamental. We need more efficiency through better use of technologies, and I think from a user perspective the potential in emerging infrastructure there is tremendous. We've got to certainly capitalise on that, and I think we'll see great progress. We need to promote awareness, and that's one of the roles, the key roles that organisations like the FIA, like the motoring clubs around the world seek to do. I think we have to take a responsible pathway on this, and there may be some discussion later in the session about the impact of issues like road pricing and so on. I think the role that organisations like the FIA, like the individual national motoring clubs can play is to help educate motorists about what they already pay for infrastructure and what they're getting in return for that, and then how we can improve the value that they get for their contribution. I think we do need to understand the balance between supply and demand from the user's point of view, and ensuring that in solutions that the user's perspective is taken into account, I think will greatly help political decision makers as well as those who are ultimately taking responsibility for the design, construction, implementation of our road infrastructure in the future. So on that note, I'll thank you very much and leave you with this parting image from one of the recent campaigns that we ran in Australia in the lead up to our most recent federal election, where we were successful in activating, I think, a very strong agenda for better roads, and got a very good response, not just in the electorate, but also from our politicians nationally in that country, and have seen a significant infrastructure agenda coming out of that. So on that note, thank you very much for your attention.